our 10th prediction for 2026 that was that Pontiac Aztek will be worth $100,000.
Tonight on That Car Show, we're joined by John Wiley, Hagerty's Director of Valuation Analytics. John truly knows his stuff with real insight into why cars are worth what they are and what the future holds for enthusiasts like us. Before we jump in, do us a quick favor. Hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. And if you've got a minute more, please leave us a review. Those small clicks make a huge difference for the show. It's a fascinating conversation with Hagerty's John Wiley, and it starts now on That Car Show. Hey, it's That Car Show. It's me and Lindsay tonight. And we're joined by a guest I wanted to have on for a long time. You've almost certainly heard of Hagerty's Bull Market List. It does get around. Tonight's guest is the guy behind it. John Wiley is Hagerty's Director of Valuation Analytics, which means he can shed some light on what exactly is going on in today's market and why you cannot afford a Porsche 964 anymore. Also, our mutual pal, Trent Abbott, insisted that we have him on. So welcome to That Car Show, John.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate being on here.
Really glad to have you here. You know, whenever the Bull Market List is announced, I always try to guess what's on it before I click. I usually get a couple right, but these aren't just gut feelings. There's real science behind it. And in fact, you have a master's degree in financial mathematics from the University of Chicago.
Right.
So tell us about the methodology here and what all goes into it.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of numbers and data crunching that goes on to make the choices. And fortunately, I'm not the only one making these picks. So there's, we have a team of analysts that help understand sort of what's happening in the market, and a further, group of people that are, compiling all of this data. So the Hagerty Auto Intel team has a lot of expertise and does a lot of, we try to understand the entire enthusiast vehicle marketplace. But, we do get to, once a year, we get to pick these 10 vehicles, maybe a motorcycle too, and that we expect to, appreciate and or hold their value for the next, year and beyond. And what's interesting is we look for, one of the great things about Hagerty is that it has a lot of data. It has not just sort of auction results and data like the price guide values, which go back as far as 2006 for some vehicles. But we also have insurance data. And so that helps us kind of understand the types of people or the sort of the demographics of a particular vehicle. And so, we can see like, are there, who's shopping for this particular vehicle? And is it, and, that includes both people getting a policy with Hagerty, people just sort of coming to Hagerty and looking to, they say, hey, I've got, a 1989 BMW 325i, maybe an S, and they want to insure for $25,000. And that's, that valuation data point isn't that unusual, but, if they're 75 years old or if they're 25 years old, that might mean something different. And so in an aggregate, we get a much better sense of kind of the demand potential for certain vehicles.
Yeah, data really is the most valuable thing anymore, isn't it? It's all about
right.
data.
Yes. It's I feel fortunate to work for Hagerty because we do have a lot of great data.
Yeah. What goes into the value of a car? Obviously, there are auction results, but is it sentimentality? Does it come down to the car's inherent value? How much is just simple rarity? Like, what's the formula here?
Yeah, there's a variety of things. I mean, sometimes there's rarity can help and it can hurt, as with and not just sort of how many did they build, but also how many are in that particular color. And sometimes, we just looked at sort of the premium, the value of a particular color for the first and second generation Mazda Miatas. And so, we look, some colors are very common. There's like classic red, which is a very common color for Miatas. And, it gets a little tiny premium in the market, but there are some rare colors, some yellows and some blues that, get big premiums or actually get a discount. And so,
That's what I was going to ask you.
right, yeah. So rarity can make a difference. Can help the car, it can hurt the car. And so, but the other thing I think that, especially as you sort of move up in the price point, and it's maybe not that specific to a particular price point, but is sort of what can you do with a car, and what kind of experiences can you have with it? Is your only experience going to be having it sit in the shop or the garage while you're waiting for parts, and it's, you can't get it to run? Or is the experience going on the Colorado Grand? And so those kinds of experiences, I think, or opportunity to have those types of experiences, really help the value of the vehicle. And so that's another big thing that helps.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that you incorporate use case and sort of like applicability to like different scenarios in the valuation of the car. Like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, and sort of a big, for a 1965 Ford Mustang, that's less of a thing, other than just that you can get parts for it and you can drive it and modify it. And, whereas for more valuable vehicles, it's more of an explicit kind of or obvious difference. And certainly I think one of the traditional value differentiators is for certain events like the London to Brighton run, where it's, cars built before 1905. And for listeners, this is sort of a funny event in London, England, where they drive very, very elderly cars, 60 miles over the course of a day. And so, but it's, if you have an eligible vehicle for that, then it's, worthwhile to get it. But if you don't, then it's sort of, you're out of luck and you can't do as much with it. So, and same with a Mille Miglia, with like the 1957 model year cutoff and stuff.
Yep. And the Cal Mille, which is a Hagerty event, I think it's 58, is that right? And you mentioned the Grand, we're 60 and older. So that really makes a real difference between like a 60 356 and a 61, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's adds up. And, I think sometimes for some of these events, they'll make exceptions and things, but I think it's it really helps the marketability of a particular vehicle. And these types of events sort of come and go in terms of popularity, but it's and so if you have a vehicle that's not eligible for an event, but it's, you'd like to do some drive, you can start organizing a tour. I think there was something like the Shelby GT350, the 1965 cars, like there's a tour for those now, and that's become more popular or something.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's is it the Drew Serb event that they do in Northern California?
Possibly.
I know, or I should say, I know he does one as well. I don't know if that's the one that you're talking about.
Probably.
But I've seen some pretty incredible pictures. There's one that they do with cobras too, because I saw a picture of a bunch of cobras in the snow in Montana, I think.
Oh, really?
Which looked incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, John, we've established. Say this again. I'm off tonight. Sorry, I'm gonna try this again.
John,
we've established. So it's been a long day, like student plays and everything.
It's been
else.
a long year already somehow.
John, I actually this morning got up early. I endeavored to drive up to the top of Pikes Peak, which you ordinarily wouldn't be able to do in the winter, but it's like 60 degrees here right now. And I made it up about as far as Glen Cove, which is, I don't know, I think it's about 10,500 feet. So, so that's what I got up to do this. So it's been a long day, but anyway, back in it.
So that's quite a day.
It is. It is. We've established your credentials as far as mathematics and valuation and all this. But what are your car credentials? Like, when did you get into cars? Were you always a car guy?
So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and sort of Silicon Valley. And so, and I think growing up there was, exposed me to a bunch of kind of unusual cars that, there's a variety of stuff. And it being California, there, stuff didn't rust and as much. And so, certainly I think smog pulled some cars off the road and things, but, so it just sort of that curiosity, like, what is that? And, what is that little beige BMW 2002 or something. And so that was, fun to see some of these cars. And, I'd ride my bike around and I'd take pictures of these cars on a film camera.
Yeah.
Right.
And
we can all relate to that.
And wait to develop them and the pictures and prints and stuff. So, but then, and it's kind of out of that, I was got into reading sort of the vintage car magazines. And at some point along the way, one of my mom's friends started vintage racing cars, like an Alfa Giulietta Spider.
Cool.
Nice.
And so, I would go to Sears Point or Laguna Seca and watch them race or something like that. So Sears Point is, of course, Sonoma Raceway or something like that.
Right.
Sure.
You can tell how long somebody's been in the car world by what era of names they use for the tracks.
Yeah. So, she married a guy who was also vintage racing, and so I, sort of learned from him a bit about, and he restored a bunch of cars and, kind of found out like what's an Austin Healey and how is that different than an Aston Martin and what's a, Jaguar XK120 and things like that. So, so that was kind of like high school, college. And, I went, I didn't go to school in California for college. I went off to the East Coast and then went to Chicago later. And, these are not really car-friendly places. And but I did keep going to these car shows, concours events. And I guess one of the other unusual kind of coincidences was that I had some relatives that lived down on the Monterey Peninsula. And so I'd go down, go down and visit them. And, occasionally they'd say, hey, we have this car show. It's just down there at the lodge at Pebble Beach. And, you can come down and stay with us. And, here's a ticket if you want. And so, and this was all much more sort of, informal at the time.
Back in the good old days.
Right. And also, I had no context of like, what is this event? And so, that kind of thing. And so I ended up, kind of getting some awareness of that event and taking pictures of it and things at the cars and stuff. So, but then, so I kept, took kind of a break for a few years, but then started going back to car shows, concours, vintage races and things. And then at some point I started this Flickr page of photos. And so again, that dates me. I think it's, I started it in about 2008 or so.
That tracks. I think that was kind of Flickr's heyday.
Right. People still use it.
I know.
So,
hasn't flickered out yet, huh?
Yeah. I worry when it changes hands or something like that. Somebody buys it or something. So I started putting pictures on there, and I've kept doing it, and I'd kind of tag the photos and describe it, and what chassis number is this car, and do I have other photos of it, things like that. So I've tried to be pretty organized about the photos, and so I am now up to like 28,000 photos on there, and and sort of like I saw this car at 12 years ago at Lime Rock Park, and then I saw it again and it's a different color and it's at Pebble Beach or something like that. And so that kind of thing has been helpful. And so anyway, at one point I kind of as I had a career track after college and studying computer science. I got into the financial world and was working as an analyst there, and kind of went through a couple different sort of in parts of that financial world with equities and then derivatives, fixed income derivatives and things, and then moved into a data science role. But sort of this combination of like I have this career, but then I'm also spending a bunch of time in going to these car events, and it seems like it's kind of this worthless hobby, and maybe I should just figure out something else to do because it's not really that worthwhile or productive. But fortunately, I found out about this opportunity at Hagerty, where they wanted somebody who could talk about sort of the market and understand values, but also knew about the cars. And so, it's like, oh, I have all these, tens of thousands of photos on Flickr that I've been labeling and tagging and things like that. And so, which is, a big part of sort of what Hagerty and the automotive intelligence team does, is kind of describing vehicles accurately. And so that's a big part of it. So fortunately that's been a great combination, and it lets me sort of talk about a big picture part of the market, but then also kind of what makes a specific car valuable. And so that sort of looking down at whatever 30,000 feet, but then looking at a specific vehicle and understanding what makes it worthwhile or valuable to somebody is helpful.
Well, can we go down the list for 2026? This was recently released.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. There's a good variety of cars. We work with the magazine media team to kind of curate the list. Sometimes, and it's a little bit more of a list of vehicles where it's, there's a little bit of curation of like, we don't want to have, despite, a little bit, some inclinations of folks, it's, we can't have a list of JDMK cars because nobody would read that. Right. So there's sort of like, let's have an American car, maybe something that's, more modern. So there's a little bit of.
Before you start, sorry. So what are the qualifications, or what are we looking for in a car that makes this list? What is it telling us? There are also differences of kind of what's the investment or investment potential. And so is it a car that's going to double in value in the next 5 years, or is it a car that sort of used to be considered very collectible and valuable for its type, and has maybe, lost some of that value in the past 5 years, and maybe we expect it to turn around and rebound. So there are sort of there, or maybe the car is already valuable and we expect it to become even more valuable. Sure.
So that's kind of some of the areas where we look, and certainly as the market has kind of cooled relative to 10 years ago or so, or even 2022, where kind of everything was going up. It is a little bit more nuanced as to, this vehicle has some potential to rebound, whereas we expect some of the other vehicles that are comparable or similar to continue to lose value or not appreciate further.
Yeah. Well, the first one that I see on the list is the 68 to 70 Dodge Charger. And I think that sort of fits in there because that's kind of an anomaly. A lot of muscle cars and cars of that era have really dropped, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, and there's, it's yes and no. I think one thing that's happened in the muscle car market is that some of the really valuable ones are still valuable, or mostly, but it's not every muscle car that's valuable. And
not across the board.
And one of the surprising things to me, and this is some more sort of this Hagerty data and the demographics really help, is the demand for muscle cars is cross-generational. It doesn't matter. There's kind of this perception that it's, people collect what they liked when they got their driver's license. And, that's, and I think that used to be really true, especially when, the car that was new in the showroom when you got your driver's license was something cool, and whatever it might be, 1961 Jaguar E-Type or something like that. But, if you got your driver's license in 1981 or 1991, maybe, there wasn't as many sort of fun things to aspire to own. And I think also as more and more cars have been restored and, and seen, you can see more stuff. So there's much more sort of interest from younger generations in more vintage cars. And I think people realize.
That's fantastic.
It's good
and I mean, especially with sort of vintage, pony cars, muscle cars, pickup trucks, you can modify these cars, they're reasonably affordable. And there's a lot of sort of, they're available, you can get parts and things like that. So,
Right. Well, and that's really encouraging because I know like I'm around a lot of the like 60s muscle car crowd. And one of the concerns like over the last few years for sure has been, are the next generations interested in these, or are we kind of, and again, this is the people where these cars were new when they were in high school.
yeah.
Or like, are we the last generation or is this going to carry on? So it's nice to hear that is like you are seeing interest from younger generations too.
Yeah, and and you can look further back at like the Ford Model A, and there's still interest in those. And and it no, it may not be a stock Model A, but it's people are still coming to Hagerty looking to insure one, and so it's remains a popular vehicle. And going back to the Charger, though, that's one of the things that helped it get on the list is that this car has a lot of screen time. It's been in a number of different movies and, across eras and things. And so I think that really helps it sort of remain relevant and something that's recognizable for different generations and things. And so the fact that kind of the values of it had dipped a bit in the past several years seemed to help it make its place on this list where it's, we expect values to turn around or at least sort of hold stable.
Do you see, when you have something like that where the value has dipped, do you see people, like that makes it more accessible to a wider group of people? Does that help? Do you see that? Like, how does that play?
Yeah, we'll look for sort of, from our price guide values and those trends, we'll look for, vehicles, people, the downward trend, and then we'll look for a signal of like potential of demand and people coming to Hagerty and saying like, quoting vehicles. And the other thing that we'll look at in a more sort of nuanced way is that, what are the values that people are either buying the cars for and putting them on policy or just sort of quoting. And so is that, are they lower than what the price guide values say, which isn't helpful for the market. But, if they're higher and it says that, somebody that's in their 40s, is looking to buy a 68 Charger and they want to spend, whatever, 100,000 on it, that's helpful for the case of that vehicle sort of holding its value over time.
Yeah. So you you start to look at the trends of like, are we seeing like the values are going up? People are calling with higher quotes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, fast forwarding a little bit, the 1999 to 2005 Mazda MX-5 Miata. So I think we're talking NC.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No, this is the NB.
Okay.
Yeah, NB.
Yeah, they made the NA for a long time, I guess.
Yeah. No, and there's also the Miata folks will tell you that there's no 1998 model year.
That's right.
So they skip a model year.
That's right.
And this is the case. This is sort of one of these other types of vehicles that picks for the bull market, which is that yes, there's kind of the one that everybody thinks is very collectible, like the NA Miata, but sometimes the market can get kind of too far out over its skis, and and that becomes very valuable or maybe overvalued, whereas a very close substitute, such as the second generation NB Miata, becomes a good deal. And so in this case, we expect that the NB Miata is going to be a good deal, relatively speaking, relative to the NA, or certainly these other cars like the Honda S2000, which has become pretty valuable.
Well, it's interesting because the NB, I think, for a long time was kind of the maligned Miata, right? It was, they had got
one of the ones.
It was, so it's good to see. Although there was the Mazda Speed MB, which I remember was a very competent car, and I'm glad to see that they're kind of coming into their own and being appreciated.
They're good. It's a good, I think, helpful pick. So.
Well, the next one I have on the list is the 1956 to 1957 Continental Mark II, a car which I know nothing about. So
not a Lincoln. It's not.
That's
Mark
right.
II.
It was its own thing, right?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, and again, this is a little bit of like a I don't know, potentially like a value play where it's like you get a lot of car for your money.
Literally a lot of car.
Yes, a lot of. I mean, there's certainly like it's a lot of steel and iron and chrome and glass and so on and so forth. But there's also, it was a very well engineered car for the time, especially for an American car. It has a lot of sort of style. It's relatively distinctive for that era of 1950s American luxury cars. So, in this case, it's kind of a call out of like people maybe have forgotten about this car and, values have maybe dipped a bit. And so we're just sort of like and we're seeing potentially some signs that there are some people that are, seeking this car out, and it's worth potentially further investigation. So.
Right.
Like not everyone has forgotten that they exist.
Right,
And maybe
yes.
the rest of you should take notice.
Yeah.
Well,
So when you go through to put the list together, like you said, you're looking at, we don't want to end up with all of one kind of car.
Yeah.
Does the variety that you try to include change every year, or do you we always try to include one of these and always one of these? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, there's sort of a guidance and an effort to balance the list. And so I don't think we necessarily, there's a Hagerty UK team and they produce a bull market list as well.
Right.
And they have defined sort of groups of vehicles. And so there's like a hot hatch and there's a sort of a classic roadster, something of that nature. And so, whereas we don't have quite as well defined categories, but we do try to have a kind of a balance of something that's a little more vintage and, it's not all 80s and 90s cars or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That Continental, I do remember it being a really beautiful thing, and things were made of metal, right? Like it was. I don't know.
None of this plastic nonsense.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was designed to be like a world beater, if I recall, right? I mean, price was no object, kind of a Rolls Royce, competitor, maybe in a way.
Yep. I think they had to. Some trivia on the hood ornament is that they had to get some defense contractor to make it because it's so precise and the sharp edges that it has and things like that.
How cool is that?
It's all well before pedestrian safety regulations.
What?
Yeah, right. And rarity. I mean, there can't be many of them, right? So that factors into
and
it.
certainly not surviving.
Yeah,
precursor to the concerns about the Cybertruck and its corners.
Yeah.
We give you the Continental hood ornament.
Yeah.
That is one thing too that we find in particular with the Miata and some of it's the NA and also the NB, but because they were raced so much and sort of used up, especially compared to a Corvette ZR1, a C4, C5 or something, Z06. Those types of cars, there's a lot more of them that were sort of put away, whereas Miatas were raced a lot more often and sort of used up. And so that sort of attrition can help the collectability of the vehicle too. And that's how you can end up with sort of these cars that were much cheaper when they were new, become more valuable when they're sort of 25, 30 years old.
Great
Right.
point. And what an important car the Miata really was, right? For us enthusiasts, it really kind of kept the flame going and all that. And so the next one on the list is the 1990 to 93 Chevrolet 454 SS. So this is something I remember one of the really cool kids at school having when I was in high school, like an older kid, Why is this on the list? I have a sense. It was really the first muscle truck, right? A modern muscle truck. Yeah,
Ford had a kind of a similar F-150 Lightning at the time that I think. It is a unusual thing. And, in this case, it is kind of, when you look at what Chevrolet will sell you as a pickup truck, a full-size truck today, it's like, this really isn't available in this combination anymore. So it's an interesting, I think that's partly why it's on the list, is because it's just, it's sort of an unrepeatable experience in this point in time for if you want a accessible, pickup truck with a big block.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is like the Lightning too, because the first gen Lightnings were not a crew cab either.
Yeah.
Which was first?
I think this came out first. I'm not 100% certain, but I think this came out first, and then I think the Ford responded a couple years later with a slightly different take on it, which had I think it was a 351.
Okay.
With a, different manifold and similar performance, but just a slightly different approach.
And these were mostly black, if I recall, right? Maybe a handful of other colors, silver, white, or something.
Yeah, maybe
red,
white.
I don't know. Yeah, okay. And then this was before, I guess, the Cyclone as well, right? Just before or about the same time?
I don't think so. I think they're about the same.
Okay.
I'll have to look and see. I can.
I think maybe 90. Yeah. And to be honest, at that time, I was, a young teenager. The Cyclone was the one that I wanted. That was the one that really caught my eye. But
yeah, but it's interesting too, because you end up with sort of these cars or vehicles that were groundbreaking at the time. Yeah. But kind of all-wheel drive, turbocharged, truck, SUV. That became kind of the standard for most vehicles these days.
Yeah, it really.
And so, whereas a rear-wheel drive, big block truck is still not very common on the market now. So
right.
And this is what this is a digression, but this is kind of I think the challenge that a car like the Porsche 959 has is that that it was so advanced, but it was kind of accurately predicted future Porsche 911 supercars, and so it's kind of like you don't need to spend $2 to $3 million for an all-wheel drive 911 with a turbocharger because it's available still.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. That that Cyclone. I remember the 454 being nearly as quick, but that Cyclone is fast by
for sure.
standards,
It's faster.
Right? It's interesting, but two very different ways of going about the same problem, I guess.
Yeah.
So, the next one on the list is the 06 to 2013 Chevy Corvette Z06. And this is a car I think that's finally getting its due, right? You could pick one up pretty cheaply there for a long time, and but
and again, it's kind of like I think certainly as the C8 has gone mid-engine, and that's now like forced induction, you have this sort of unusual drivetrain combination, which is 7-liter rear-wheel drive, front-engine car, manual transmission, naturally aspirated. So it's you kind of end up with these cars where it's no, they're not necessarily cheap, but it's also sort of something that it's not something you can find easily in the market. And so that's partly why it's on this list.
Yeah. Well, hell of a lot of car for the money for sure.
Yeah.
So the 69 to 72 Alfa Romeo GTV. This is a car, I swear, 10 years ago, you never saw them around, and now you see them everywhere, right? They really came out of the woodwork, but they're such wonderful cars in every way.
Yeah, no, I think, this is kind of one of the challenges of the bull market list is sometimes we get a bit specific. And so in this case, we're picking out the 1750, which is kind of the late 60s, early 70s version, but not the 2-liter 2000 GTV, which has kind of a different grille and it certainly has, more power and is faster as a 2-liter, but, there's the sort of, I think the aficionado take is that the 1750 is a little bit sweeter and maybe revs a little bit easier. And I think they are, rare cars. It's a little bit hard to say how many are surviving and around on the market, but the other sort of difference, and this is if you're reading or paying attention, my level of insight into the 454 SS versus the Alpha should be telling. But the other thing that I think can be helpful for this car is I think the 69 had this flying buttress seat design, which is sort of as with like the Porsche world, there's sort of 1 year only model year differences that everybody sort of goes crazy over. So, so I think there's a few factors that help this vehicle become more collectible.
Well, I think something else about this car, sorry to interrupt, is that it really has become a great alternative to an old Porsche, right? As prices and those have just skyrocketed, right? This is
no, it's and I think and there's a little bit of that the event eligibility thing where it's like if you can take it to an event or a show that's suitable for the car, then that's really helpful. In Southern California, there's now this kind of Italian car show, sort of similar to 𝘛𝘩𝘢𝘵 the air-cooled Porsche show, where and this one is Machinissima.
Yep.
Machinissima. So again, it's like if you like that event or want to have a car in that event, this is getting a 1750 GTV is probably a good place to start.
Yeah. And I think too, when you see people start to singerify, vehicles, right?
Yeah.
There's the Alphaholics and these other outfits. I think that's a sign that there's something to it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more? I'm very curious about the flying buttress seats that you mentioned.
I think it's it's a little bit like a bucket seat. It's and I'm not certain, but I'm assuming that they're inspired by a Zagato seat design, which is that you basically have a seat, and then Zagato, which has just a kind of a tubular steel frame, with some padding and some vinyl or leather or something or cloth covering. But Zagato would have seats where they'd kind of weld this little diagonal that went from the 3/4 up the seat back to the front of the seat, and then there'd be like a little pad on the side. So it was very much just like a kind of improvised steel frame bucket seat. And so I think this seat probably is a little bit different take on that, where it's not quite the same steel tubing behind it, but it's it's sort of curved at the side of each of the seat back, and it kind of just helps you stay in place a little bit better.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's all these nuances,
Yeah.
Alphas are good for that, though, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I think there's a lot of maybe it's a sign of the collectability of a vehicle is when Corvette people, Porsche, whomever, start getting into the the specifics of a particular car.
Right.
Yeah.
That car show is brought to you by Sheffield Watches. Sheffield is the storied watchmaking brand that was revived a couple of years back by our good friend Jay Turkbus, and it's seen wild success in both the car and watch enthusiast communities. Sheffield offers a wide selection of watches, many inspired by the iconic designs of its 1960s dive models, most notably the one that Jay's parents gave him in 1970, which ignited his lifelong passion for watches. Sheffield watches are high quality, reasonably priced, and a great value. Sheffield has truly become the car guy and car gal's watch of choice. Order your Sheffield watch at SheffieldWatches.com. Give them a follow on the gram at Sheffield_allsport_watches, and tell them that car show sent you. Yeah. Well,
Very
moving
true.
on again to a newer car,
Yep.
2006 to 2010 BMW M5. This, of course, is the 500 horsepower V10.
Right.
It was the 1 year they put a V10 in an M5. And I think this is a car where, the ones that are left are the good ones, right? Like they got cheap for a while, young people had them, burned them up, crashed them, whatever. And so the ones that are left are really the good ones. It was a very different character, right, than I think the M5s before and the M5s after. And also the styling was really divisive.
Yeah.
Are these the Bangle era?
Yeah, this is the funny sharp-eyed one headlight car. I mean, and this similar to some of the other cars on the list, including the Corvette C606. This is an unusual sort of relatively large displacement, naturally aspirated engine with 500 horsepower. I think there's 3 cars on the list with about 500 horsepower. But
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's and there's a little bit of element of substitution where I think a lot of people like the predecessor M5, which is the E39 with a 5-liter V8 or 4.9-liter V8 that's has the manual transmission and is sort of more traditional styling.
Right.
But it's so you end up with this kind of dynamic where it's like, yes, that car is collectible and valuable, but like this is also an interesting car and maybe is undervalued.
Yeah.
And Ryan, as you pointed out, a lot of these got used up or broke, and people couldn't afford to fix them for a variety of reasons. But the other thing that's interesting too with this is that we've seen a lot of, I think about 10% of the cars sold new in the U.S. have since been exported. So that's sort of, it's not just that, they've been crashed or, not maintained or something like that, but they're not here anymore.
Interesting.
And so
And
that's
do you know where
unusual.
they went?
Yeah, good question.
Probably
what
back
areas
to
of the
Europe, but potentially other places too. So, and it's not, and it could be that they just have potentially in Europe, they have better appreciation for the car and the performance. So, and there's certainly like the manual transmission cars that were available here in the U.S. are at a premium. I think it's potentially like 50% more. But part of it is I think that the 7-speed SMG sequential manual gearbox, sort of automated single clutch transmission is like, yes, there are some issues with it, but also some of those issues are getting sorted out. So I think that helps the car kind of become a little bit more collectible.
And John, people are now sentimental for those first generation,
You got
SMG type transmissions like the Murcielago, and it's like it's funny how things come around. And
I will, and this is again sort of the fun thing of working for Hagerty with the data that we have available is that there's a peculiar phenomenon that is in the market, which is that Ferraris and Lamborghinis and BMWs, were sold in sort of that 2000s era, 2010s era with these single clutch automated manual transmission cars. If you convert a E46, so 2000s, early 2000s BMW M3 to a manual transmission car, it tends to, gain in value. People like that transmission in that car better, the manual. If you convert, and BMW built lots of manuals of that car too. If you convert,
that's interesting. Like considering how many of those were manual to start.
Right. Yeah, but it's some of and a little bit of it is that people didn't drive the SMG cars as much because they didn't like the transmission.
Different kind of customer.
So it's it's fewer miles, and they spent, they got it in an unusual color and things like that. The other thing though of this is that if people convert like a Ferrari F1 transmission to a manual transmission gated shift car, it doesn't tend to help the value of the car. And it's a strange dynamic where I think people really just go after Ferrari collectors really just go after the rarity of the manual transmission car. And they still have the Ferrari factory blessing. Whereas, so it's a strange dynamic of this market where it's like some people and some cars do well and appreciate when you convert them to a manual and other cars don't.
So interesting.
Do you think that's like, I don't know if you have the data, if this is something that you have visibility into, but do you think it's the usability of cars? I mean, when I think of an E46, I know a lot of those are, like at this point, they're old enough, people are looking at them as track cars.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's less common in the Ferrari world. Is that something that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ferrari is still a lot more sensitive to mileage than some of the other makes and things, and so it is very much like the fewer the miles, the better or the more valuable the car.
Right.
And as wild as a V10 in a midsize sports sedan seems now, I mean, lest we forget, Audi was doing it with the S6, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that was nearly the rocket that the M5 was with, similar power. But those were kind of strange days, right? For manufacturers,
Right. When BMW had an F1 team and was racing cars.
Yeah.
Well, when
so
you
long
think
ago,
about
but
it,
not, right?
And when you think about it now, in terms of like, there's so much talk about engagement these days, which wasn't as much kind of in the ether at that time. But think about, like, love them or hate them, those cars certainly generated engagement,
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
debuted.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, moving on, one I don't know a ton about. I remember them around back in the day, but they never seemed common even then, which maybe factors into why it's on this list. But the 1981 to 1993, and that's shocking that they made it up to 93, but the Dodge Ram Charger, which was sort of a Bronco competitor, I guess you could call it.
Yeah. And, as with some of the other vehicles on the list, this is a little bit of a substitution play where it's, people remember the Broncos or the Blazers, and that's, and they're potentially easier to find. But, this is a very similar experience to those, but at potentially at a lower price point. And so it can be worth looking for some of these. And, and it's very much that era before Dodge came out with that new look pickup truck in the mid 90s.
Right.
And so I think this has kind of fallen off the radar of a lot of enthusiasts.
Sure. One of the great hood ornaments of all time, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Did they make very
3
many
pounds of hood ornament? Sorry,
Ram Charger? No, like, did they make very many Ram Chargers when you compare to how many Broncos, and like the K5 Blazer would have been a competitor at that point?
Right. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, I think it's probably a much rarer truck, is like just, and partly with the sales, lack of sales of sort of the similar Dodge Ram trucks of that time. I think the Ram Charger is probably also a much smaller part of the market for that kind of full-size two-door SUV.
Well, when you think about how much of the market the Bronco and the Blazer had, that would have been an uphill battle. But it's funny that you mentioned the Ram Charger, because I actually saw one over Christmas in person. I could not believe it on the road.
Right.
Blast from the past.
Yeah, it was wild. I know. That I only know.
Yeah, right. So the next one, I think probably the 25-year rule has something to do with this one. It's the 95 to 98 Nissan Skyline GTR. I mean, I think its charms are pretty clear to all of us, but what else is factored into that being on the list?
Yeah, so this is maybe echoing the last pick too, but there's a bit of a substitution with this one, as that the predecessor, the R32, kind of groundbreaking all-wheel drive Skyline that was only sold in Japan as well. That's gets a lot of attention for being kind of the debut of this era of Skylines. And then, the succeeding, the third generation Skyline, the R34, that's been in lots of movies and is sort of seen as much more sort of pretty or a better design. The R33 is kind of this forgotten middle child of that Skyline generation, where it's and so the values kind of reflect that, where it's it's much less common, and the values of it are a lot lower, especially relative to some of the other ones. So it's it's a third of the value of like an R34.
Interesting.
And we've already seen sort of this pickup of transition of imports of the R34 relative to R33, and so it's kind of like there's potentially already a cap on the R33s, and in the volume number of vehicles available in the country. So that portends well for its appreciation relative to the R34.
Was this still the gentleman's agreement era of the 276 horsepower, on paper?
Right.
But it's amazing how much things have changed, right? How quickly that flew out the window. Wow.
But and the other thing too, that with Nissan and that sort of they're gradually doing kind of heritage parts and things, is that they're actually have looked into this and said it is interesting how many Skylines are now in the U.S. and maybe it's something that we should help out with, or get make more parts, reintroduce parts for these cars and things. And so that is something that we've seen, is that they're now gradually starting to reintroduce parts for the Skyline, which I think will help their usability.
Well, I mean, Nissan has such a performance heritage, and it always bothered me for so long, how they didn't tap into it. It's good to see them doing that again, Two more cars on the list, the 95 to 98 Volkswagen Golf GTI VR6. Again, this is one as a young person I would have killed for, and now I think in retrospect, we realize how special they were, right?
Yeah, and and as with like the Miata or so, this is a car of attrition where there are not many of them around anymore. Certainly not that are in nice condition, because it was such a popular high school car. Yeah, and I think we know how high schoolers treat their cars, but it's it is, yeah. So it's and this is an interesting car too, because it's the VR6, which is much more sort of has a lot better performance than the sort of 1.8 and the 4 cylinders. So it's an interesting kind of difference, and and again, this is as Volkswagen has kind of moved away from the GTI is, I think, maybe in is no longer available in this country, and certainly, or at least the manual options gone away and things, and so it's much more of an e-Golf or a Golf R or something. So finding something that's like a VR6 with a manual transmission and naturally aspirated is a pretty desirable option.
Yep, for sure. And the last car on the list is a car I think we can all get behind wholeheartedly. It's the Porsche Carrera GT. But why this year?
It's a neat car because it's, as with some of these others, it's not, Porsche just doesn't really offer this anymore, which is this mid-engine car with a V10 engine that's naturally aspirated and a manual transmission. And so, and certainly it's a 7-figure car. But I think there's a few factors that are starting to help its value and potential appreciation. One is, they did the suspension recall recently, a couple of years ago, and so the cars are now potentially much better to drive. Tire technology's advanced greatly in the past 20 years. So Michelin can sell tires that are much more sort of appropriate for the vehicle. And then kind of at the high end of the market, there is kind of this better understanding of, yes, most of them are GT silver or seal gray or something, or, but there are, I think that's, let me see, I think there's something like 57 paint to sample cars. And, maybe about half of them were sold in the rest of the world, and fewer than half were sold in the US. And so, so those paint to sample cars are, and that's 57 out of about 1,270 or so that were built. And so those cars we're seeing are becoming very valuable. We have this sort of
there. Sorry to interrupt. What's the gulf there with the paint to sample cars and the standard car?
It can be a little tough to identify it, but we recently, we occasionally will do this thing called a pricing note for our price guide values, which is that if the car has if it's a 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Z06 with a big gas tank or a small gas tank, sometimes, it's one of the tanks is worth another $50,000 or something like that. So in this case, what we've determined is that these paint to sample Porsche Carrera GTs can be worth 50% more than sort of a similar sort of regular production car. And so that's, it's...
I wonder what a premium it was at the time. I know I have a sense of if you go in and get a new, GT3, what that paint costs, but just think of the how that investment paid off, right? Just the paint. It's wild.
Well, especially when you think about at the time, now everybody's familiar with paint to sample and paying more for a color. And that concept at the time was newish or much less common. So then to look at whatever the premium was, I would imagine it was even more, striking.
I mean, I think you had to know that you could do it, and so I think it was unusual.
And now everyone does it, so I'm thinking GT Silver is the move 20 years from now, right? At least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, the move is to pointedly not do PTS.
Right. A good appliance white or something. Right. You just don't see anymore, right?
Well, and John, I know there was the Carrera GT that I think Porsche did a full restoration on, and it's that blue one. I think it's called Speedster Blue.
I think, I mean, they've done a couple, I think, and there was an oak green car that they did too, that was,
So good.
and so that's the other kind of option, is to go back, send it back to Porsche Special Wishes and get, a restored Carrera GT in a different color or something. So.
We've got the Canepa cars now too, right? He's done dozens, I think, which is kind of wild to think about, right? Because they seem like these sacred cows, and then, he's redoing them at even that much more of a premium. But so, I was looking through this list, and I've followed this for a while, for years, and it struck me, are there any cars that come up year after year, but they never make the final list, or like always the bridesmaid, never the bull market bride kind of thing?
I don't know. There's sometimes, so there are a couple, some of the behind the scenes things is one, we have to be able to find one to photograph it and put it in the magazine. And so if we can't find one or don't think that we can find one, then that sort of means it's not on the list. So that shapes what happens. The other thing is that one of the sort of things to look out for is some of these cars, we didn't carry or we didn't have in the Hagerty price guide a year ago. And so as we, in some cases, if you're kind of anticipating like a future pick and something seems like it should be covered in the Hagerty price guide, but it isn't, then that could be a potentially good pick in the future. So in this case, like, for example, the E60 BMW M5, like we didn't have that values in the Hagerty price guide a year ago, but we've since added it because we feel like it's becoming collectible despite its appearances and things. So those are kind of the things. But if there are vehicles where it's some unusual car, say a Nissan Pulsar GTI R, is potentially fun, but very hard to track down, we may not put it on the list.
I'm laughing because I literally took a picture of a Pulsar NX last night. I hadn't seen one in a long time. And it wasn't anything special, but it had, you could get the different rear ends. Do you remember the tops?
Yeah,
you
different.
Snap in a fastback or a wagon, and this was the wagon. And I almost sent it to you, Lindsay, and I thought I thought it was like a bridge too far.
I'm always up
cool
for spotting,
right?
car spotting. I mean, I feel like you and Dan are the poor recipients of my constant, look at this. I mean, you guys were talking, I saw an R34 Skyline right-hand drive at Christmas and immediately sent it to Dan and Ryan.
It's no Defender, but that's
we got to mix it up every now and then, right?
So, so John, obviously this is but one small part of your role at Hagerty. I'm sure you are also heavily involved with the auction side of things with Broad Arrow, right?
Yeah, I mean, we try to, because we're looking at the whole market, we do try to maintain some neutrality as to the auctions, and further, we won't necessarily call out, this auction, and this auction company did really well or did really poorly or something like that. So we do try to just kind of observe what's happening in the market and things. But
it's a judgment-free zone.
Yeah.
And I imagine the online auctions in particular have really skewed values, especially the more accessible cars.
Yeah, and there's kind of one, certainly that availability and being able to find a particular car, and certainly with an online auction has helped a lot of cars become more collectible. So that sort of, if in particular with live auctions, there's only so much time that a car can cross the block and, and so many hours in the day and things. But with an online auction, there's so much more sort of breadth and scale and things. So it's so I think that format of auction has really helped in sort of broadening out what's considered collectible.
I don't think you go back a few years. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Right?
Yeah, no, it is. It's a really remarkable change.
Yeah, it has.
We do see the online auction market has, they've long sold more vehicles than live auctions, but it's, their total sales in dollars is now taken the lead pretty convincingly. Yeah. So it's, I think they're doing about $1.7 billion in sales in North America last year. So, and that's, I think the live auctions were about $1.4 billion in sales. So they've gotten a pretty good size lead now.
It's just one of those things I just thought never would be, right? Like Uber or, it's just like that doesn't. That's
Why would anybody do that?
Yeah, right.
Well, it's like when Amazon first started and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to order a book online and I'll actually get it.
Yeah. The world has changed so much in such a short amount of time and continues to do so. It's pretty wild.
Yep.
Can you give us sort of a look into, I don't know, the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like general trends? I know you're not can't read the future, but
get out the crystal ball.
We we started forecasting values a little bit. I won't get into that, but we do make year-end predictions for some predictions for this year, 2026, and and then we'll also score our prior year's predictions. And so we occasionally we are pretty accurate. Other times we've had a lot of misses, but one of the things in sort of one of the general trends, or I will say one of the predictions that we made, and this was kind of a little bit jokingly, but it was, entirely joking, was that we get a lot of kind of requests from people saying, I have this Ferrari, Porsche, Corvette, something, and I think I want to insure it for $500,000, and it's well, what is that based on? And it turns out oftentimes that we're getting these requests where it's some AI chatbot that sort of pulls in data and says, based on this listing price of this car, it's now, we think this, with this mileage and then this color, we think it's, worth $500,000. And so we tend to push back on that. So one of our predictions on that was, and this is because oftentimes asking prices are not what's actually the price that's paid. But our 10th prediction for 2026 that was that Pontiac Aztek will be worth $100,000. And so so we'll see. We'll check to come back and see if we get any requests for sort of $100,000 Pontiac Aztek.
That's hysterical.
That car was so ahead of its time, and it's. I wonder how much of that was the fault of the car and how much of that was the fault of the marketing and everything
the
else.
Design.
But,
I think it was the marketing, but
a lot of plastic
so John,
at play too.
So my husband just moved here from Albuquerque, and when he was in Albuquerque, his daily driver was one of the Aztecs in the Breaking Bad color with the mismatched wheels for like a year and a half, and he raves about it. He's like,
I think it's a great
car. Never left him stranded. Super capable.
Well, and if there ends up being the Pontiac Aztek tour that visits the Peninsula Hotel or something, and somewhere, then maybe it will turn into a six-figure car. But
everyone will say Hagerty knew it all along.
Yeah.
So,
well, John, I have learned a lot tonight. This has really been fascinating, and I feel like I could talk to you for another hour very easily. But one important question we didn't ask, and that's what's in your garage.
Yeah, I have two cars. One, my daily driver is a 2018 Alfa Romeo Giulia, just the four-cylinder. So,
well played,
and I got that,
those.
Off lease. It's a fun, kind of usable car, but it's a little bit different. And, so that's a nice car. I've had that about 5-6 years now. So,
I really like
it's
those.
a good car.
Yeah, it's a good answer.
I like it. The other car I've had long.
We accept that answer.
Yeah.
The other car I've had longer. It's sort of one of these, as Dave Kinney would say, buy what you love, don't buy something for appreciation potential. But it's a 2006 Maserati Grand Sport Spider, which I bought cheaply.
Yes. Yes.
And then, spent a lot to sort of catch up on maintenance. And, it's not vintage and it's not that modern, but it was my only car for a while.
Really?
And we spoke earlier about sort of these automated single clutch transmissions. I think in this car, it's the right transmission. And obviously I'm biased because I have one.
Yeah.
But, it's not, I don't think people need to be using the clutch pedal, sort of the whatever the original design brief was. It wasn't the, full track driving engagement kind of thing. So I think it suits the car. I don't feel like it's not perfect, but I think it works pretty well. So
I almost bought a coupe back in the day. Yeah. I came
they're
very
great
close.
deals.
Yeah, they're neat. I mean, you've got is it the 360 or the 430 engine up front?
It's based on the 430 engine.
Okay,
And so when it came out, it was available before the 430 had it. Right. It is the 4.2 format. It's dry sump, it has a 4-cam, 390 horsepower, 400 horsepower V8. So I think it's a lot of car for the money.
Absolutely.
But
that is an enthusiast garage, John.
It really is.
That's
I love that.
Pretty great lineup. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that two-car solution.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'd like to get something more vintage at some point, but I need to find space for it. So.
Yeah. And I feel like those spiders and those coupes, they're coming up too, aren't they? People are finally kind of catching up.
I don't know.
A little bit. Let's make it so, right?
And it's kind of, as with a lot of things, it's kind of the liquidity of the market helps it. And so I think as more of them appear on the market and there's bought and sold, then there's sort of, and this is actually, speaking of, this is that era Maserati Coupe Spider, we don't cover in the Hagerty price guide yet. So it's not really something that we have. We don't see the demand to have it in the guide, and we also don't really have the transaction data yet to cover it. So.
Sure. Okay, right on. Well, John, I feel like you're kind of living the dream. You're working for Hagerty, doing what you're doing. I mean, you really have the best of both of your worlds, right? You're doing a pretty cool thing, and I think the work you do is only going to play more and more into this enthusiast world, moving forward for a number of reasons. So I think your timing is perfect too. Lindsay, is there anything else?
Okay. So my question is, what has been the most surprising thing that you have either experienced or that you've seen in the trends as you're putting the list together, or like what's something that people assume about valuations that is like totally incorrect?
To me, the surprising thing is kind of this stereotype or belief that people collect the thing that they liked, when they were 16 years old, and yes, I think that probably was true, or it needs to be. There needs to be a sort of a follow-up, which is that, it doesn't need to have been the car that was for sale new when they were 16 years old. It could be the car that was, and this is the follow-up podcast or something. But one of the things with the Miata, the NA Miata, which is the 1990 to 1997 built car, that is the most commonly quoted vehicle of Gen Z. And Gen Z, the oldest Gen Zers, as far as Hagerty was concerned, they were born in 1997. So this car was out of production by the time the oldest of those were born. So that, for me, that's kind of the surprising thing that we see is that, people like vehicles, but there's less and less of a sort of association of like the new vehicles of their era.
That it's like a guarantee, hard and fast rule that it's like whatever was new when they were in high school. Well, and that's
I think that used to be the case, but it's no longer.
Well, and you talked about looking at, lifestyle and kind of usability and versatility of the car. And like, you
Yeah.
make a good point with, this is the car, or the people quoting this particular car were born that year. So they obviously weren't aware of it at the time.
Right.
But when
But
you
yeah, I
look,
mean, now they see that they can do, driving tours or events or something with it. And so it speaks to them in some other way besides sort of the car that they wanted when they were about to get their driver's license.
yeah. Well, and you look at too, I mean, you mentioned movies earlier with the Skyline, like maybe the cars weren't brand new, but if you look at the movies that were like coming out when they were learning to drive, that's going to influence their likes too. And it might not be a car that was brand new at the time too. So
Yeah. If Dom Toretto drove one,
yeah,
then
exactly.
maybe that speaks. Maybe
Not
you
to
don't
put
want
too
that
fine a
car,
point
but
on
you
it.
do.
Yeah.
You read
We
my
can't
mind.
argue with the data. And John Wiley, it's really been a pleasure having you on. So, again, John, you are Hagerty's Director of Valuation Analytics, and it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much. And I would
Yeah.
love to have you back. I know, we got to have you back. There's got to be a part 2 to this.
There's so much more to talk about.
It really is. It's fascinating. It really is. And you're obviously a true enthusiast as well, as evidenced by your 2-car solution.
Yeah.
And it's really been fun. So,
Thank
John
you so much
Wiley.
for joining us.
Lindsay, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
having me on.
Yeah,
Really
this was
appreciate
fun.
having you on. Yeah. All right. Until next time, John Wiley. And this has been That Car Show. Lindsay?
And remember, always be driving, and we'll see you next week.